This is another crab-like video on modifying the PAP M85 or M92, which would be about the same for this purpose. I wanted to put an optic on here, put a little rail on here, but I don't like all that junk on my handguards. So I found a optic rail that fits these pistols from Stormwerkz.com, Stormwerkz, that fits onto the top strap. Now they do give you a schematic with it, but since I don't have a milling machine, I have to do this by hand. So I centered my rail up, which fits in a little groove on this top strap, and lined it up to make sure that it wasn't resting up on the back sight or up on the hinge. Get it centered up so that it lays flat in there. And I took a 7/64 drill bit, which fits inside the threads, and marked the masking tape that I already had on top of this strap, and then the scratch marks that the drill bit point left in the finish I was able to go after with a center punch and mark it permanently, and then take my tape off, which leaves me with 4 center punch marks that will line up with my holes. Now this is very hard material, so instead of trying to ruin a standard high-speed drill bit, I bought a Cobalt 9/64 to go through this process. So let me get it set up in the drill press and we'll see how that goes. Now I'm going to put a little blankie over top of the receiver, try to keep the junk out of the bottom. I'll pump some oil onto there and give it a go. Okay. There we go. Alright. I'll finish the other holes, and then we'll get to the mounting process. Alright, I have 3 of the holes drilled and the 4th one started, but I just wanted to make sure that I stressed the point that this is being drilled very, very slowly, lightly, and very, very wet with oil, because this is hard material. And if you look closely, Hopefully I can get this in frame here. Let me get something for a pointer. Sorry about all the wiggling going on, but if you look right here, this is the start of my last hole. Right next to this hole is a spot weld. So that's going to be very, very hard material. That's why I'm using a cobalt drill bit. And like I said, I'm drilling very lightly, very slowly, and with plenty of oil so that I don't ruin the drill bit. Okay. Knock the little burrs off. They're not gonna be much of a problem at all. As soon as I tighten the screws down, they'll flatten out, which there's almost nothing there anyhow. On the top it's nice and smooth. On the bottom there's just a little bit that I can feel, but not enough to hamper the process. Okay, what I found out is that my holes walked off a little bit, so I have to tune them up a little to get the screws lined up. And I do in fact have a carbide cutter for my Dremel tool, so I'm just going to carefully open those up the direction that they need to go a little bit, which isn't going to hurt how tight the sight will fit on there after, or the rail will fit on there after it's done, because it is of course only being mounted on the dust cover, which isn't a 100% solid piece of the gun to begin with, so it'll be just fine. So I'll get this started, and then we'll get it finished up. Alright, just on a little side note, if you have to do any tuning up of the holes here, and you do use a carbide cutter, be very careful to keep the tool pressed against the side of the hole at all times, because if you let it loose and it has a chance to jump around, and that's called chatter, it will snap off and you will have wasted probably $10 on a broken carbide tool. Okay, after about 4 tries I was able to get the screws to start their travel easily, which is exactly what you want. Got my Loctite in there. Get that turned in. Just nice and easy. Not all in a row. Try to alternate the tightening process a little at a time, and then I'll go back over and snug each one down a little at a time, not have any daylight showing underneath, so that when I do finally get it clamped it's not standing up on one of the ledges or something. Okay, these are very small screws, so I'm not tightening them very hard. Plus, like I said, it's going into aluminum, so I'm being careful not to strip the threads out of the rail. And there you go. Now, I'm not going to mess around with it until that Loctite sets up, but that will hold everything together. Clean everything out, make sure that there's no leftover metal dust from my grinding process. I'll hit it with the air hose a little, put the operating rod and whatnot back in there. But that is going to make things just how I want it. Now, the last thing is, because of the space that's in between here, maybe I can turn this a little and show you its side view, that there is not a whole lot of length to work with on this rail. Because it sits down in between this little ramp part in the front hinge and the ramp part that protects the rear sight. So you're going to be a little limited as to what kind of optic you can put on here before it ends up running into one of these points. There's a maybe a couple of reflex sights that come up and have the laser housing raised up a little bit. It may go over there, but I may have to go with a mini sight, or I'm thinking my Redfield Counter-Strike may work on there fairly well, because the mount is a little smaller and the rest of the device is a little higher. But I'll get that figured out once, now that my rail is installed. Okay, finish cleaning things up a little bit, and there you go. If you do not want all that nonsense, I call it nonsense, you might think it's cool, that's okay too. I'm not, everybody likes their own stuff. I do not like stuff on the front, so I call it nonsense. I can get that little bit of an option without having things on my hand guards. Okay, there you go. And as always, be safe and have fun.